Of course, today, unless you've been living under a rock, Huw Edwards, disgraced BBC newsreader, sentenced yesterday to 6 months prison, suspended for 2 years, which basically means, long story short, if he commits any other crimes in the next 2 years, he'll be going straight into the slammer. Lots of you arguing that should have happened anyway yesterday, regardless. But the judge has said his, quote, long-earned reputation is now in tatters.
Now, the court heard that he paid up to £1,500 to a convicted paedophile who sent him 41 illegal images over WhatsApp between December 2020 and August 2021. We know the youngest child involved in those images was between the ages of 7 and 9.
He's required to sign the sex offenders register for 7 years and pay £3,128 in costs and a victim surcharge as well. And
he's been asked to repay the £200,000 salary he's received since his arrest, which he has so far refused, and he will also keep his £300,000 a year pension. Oh,
that's the one, isn't it? The 300k a year pension. Well, CEO and founder of Freedom from Abuse, Marilyn Hawes, joins us now. Good morning, Marilyn. Your take, please, on Huw Edwards' sentence, first of all.
What sentence? Sorry, what sentence? I mean, I was listening to a barrister yesterday, for which I absolutely... I mean, I've been doing this for years, as you know, and normally a case like this would go to the Crown Court. So he wasn't a judge, was it? It was a magistrate, so it's not really quite the same thing. I honestly do think it's just outrageous, and I deal a lot with the people who have been abused, and, you know, you look at him there, he arrogantly walks into court. Remorse, he's only remorseful because he's been caught. I mean, I do, you know, over the years I've gone into prisons, I've spoken to child abusers. They are arrogant, they are entitled, they're narcissistic. He's displayed all of that. They have no empathy. Oh, he's very sorry. Well, he would be because he's been caught and he's terrified of going to prison. Oh, and he might be vulnerable in prison. Well, what about the kids that he has been sort of pleasuring himself watching? And I'm not going to describe what those moving images are. I would just say, if anybody adult wants to look at the Copine scale and look at category A, you'll see what he was watching. He's a grubby little toad. And these are not... If one more person, I hear one more presenter or reporter say indecent images, I'm going to implode. These are not indecent images. These are real children in real time being brutally abused, some even murdered, and there's men getting off on it. And, you know, sometimes, do you know what? I think the judges should look at this stuff and then they might see, you know, he says he didn't have the memory. I'm sorry, if you'd seen this stuff, as anybody in the police force will tell you has to look at it, you can't forget it. He's a liar. And I mean, also, what don't we know? What don't we know about maybe other things? Exactly. I don't believe that this is just what we see here now. I really feel very strongly about this. I'm sorry. His barrister did a good job for him, didn't he?
I heard Harry Coles, who's the political editor at The Sun, talking about this. Of course, The Sun did the big scoop that kind of unveiled it all right at the beginning. He was saying last night that they were sitting on allegations relating to Huw Edwards since 2008. Now, he was only in court facing crimes, you know, charges, allegations for one period between 2020 and I think 2021, but it certainly seems as though there's been lots of other rumours and allegations doing the rounds. Given that, obviously you can only be tried for what appears before court, but it feels as though there's possibly more to this story, and of course there would be, surely. I mean, this doesn't just happen temporarily for a small period of time. What about the children in all of this? Because I know that you work a lot with victims of abuse. You know, for me, it's the 7-year-old. 2 of the images were of children as young as 7 out of the 41 indecent images that he was viewing. Are any attempts ever made to try and track down these children, to try and rehabilitate them? Because all this talk of rehabilitating him, what about the kids?
Well, it's very difficult to track them because what happens is these go down in the dark web, and those poor kids, their images are out there forever. And I must say, you said it, indecent images, they're not. They're not indecent images. These are real children. The trouble is, it's out there on the World Wide Web, and it's circling around for plenty of other people like Huw Edwards to buy them at a great cost. I mean, if you can get a fresh bit of video, the offenders call that fresh meat down on the dark web. I've met enough of these people in prison. Yeah, if he went to prison, he would be very vulnerable, because one thing prisoners don't like is nonsense. and they give them a bad time, and sorry, rightly so. I mean, his barrister has done a good job for him, that's all I can say. I mean, why does he need to worry? I mean, £300,000 pension, £200,000 that he's not going to give back. I mean, if you had any remorse, if you had any sense of conscience, he surely would give back some of that money that he earned, the 200,000. I think he's a nasty piece of work. These people, he would have been doing this for a long time, and what didn't happen, here we go again, the BBC not shining in glory. You know, and they said only yesterday or the day before, I quote, we will be, this is Tim Davie and Samir Shah, the new chair, we will be looking at lessons from this period. Oh, good Lord, spare me. They learnt nothing from Rolf Harris and Savile. They've just launched another child abuser in plain sight, haven't they? Why are people paying their licence? I'm not going to. It's outrageous.
Yeah, OK. Marilyn, in the mitigation, Huw Edwards' defence lawyer said that because of the fact he went to Cardiff and didn't get into Oxford University, he felt inferior at the BBC to his colleagues. He talked about how his father was abusive as a child. I mean, this is all rubbish, isn't it? Plenty of people feel inferior or lack confidence or have abusive childhoods. They don't go on to become paedophiles.
Now you've uncovered it, you see. There's your deep dive. I am a passionate supporter of proper parenting in the early years. Now, he had an abusive father. Now, only 1 in 8 people that had abuse as a child will go on and be like him, right? So that is a myth that people turn out to be the same. But said that he has that very thing about his father being abusive causes adverse childhood experiences. Those adverse childhood experiences in the first 3 years of a child's life create awful damage to the brain. The cortisol through the trauma breaks the neural pathways and distorts the landscape of the brain. Now, I bet when he was at school, if someone did a deep dive on his schooling, I bet he was either very aggressive or very regressed and a people pleaser. The behaviours at that time would not have been understood. And he should have, and I'm saying this to anybody now, in early years, working in nurseries, children that are extreme, outside the normal expectation, then get those children looked at and get a deep dive done on them and don't keep writing it off as ADHD. He would have done this and there'd been distortions in his behaviour for years. And that's what should have happened, a deeper dive. And of course, the trouble is, there will be BBC colleagues. I mean, a so-called whistleblowing policy, I bet that wasn't robust. I bet there are people there terrified of their own jobs who were touched by him, adults, not just kids, young men, you know, they're terrified of coming forward. And I mean, as for the BBC saying about lessons and reflecting, well, they never reflected in the past. And they're joined to the government hip, aren't they? I mean, I am outraged I'm outraged by this magistrate that did what that person did. I mean, they should sit down and watch these awful things. It's just debased. It's vile.
It's depraved, 100%. Marilyn, can I ask you this? Because somebody's tweeted me asking me this question, so I pass it on to you, and I don't know whether you agree or not. The question is, chemical castration. Why don't we do it for people who've committed paedophilia?
No, it doesn't work. I know the police are trying it, but I get a lot of information from ATSA, which is in America. That's the Association of Treatment of Sex Abusers. We have one over here called NOTA, which is a national organisation of treatment from abusers. What you can't do, guaranteed, is turn off the brain. The fantasy sits in the brain. When you are chemically castrated, it means your bits don't work, right? But I have seen over the years when people are being chemically castrated, so few people, so many of them have become, no one's born this way, but have become, by the landscape of the brain changing, wired in this way. I mean, he could have, if he had felt so remorse, he could have gone and got help. There's an organisation called Stop It Now. They could have helped him, but they don't want to change until they get caught.
Yeah.
But that damage in the early years, that's the castration. The trouble is, they will use objects and the abuse gets worse. They will use bottles. They will use all sorts of objects. They've got fingers.
Okay.
They've got digits.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, Marilyn.
You know, that's the trouble. Doesn't work.
OK, Marilyn Hawes, CEO and founder of Freedom from Abuse. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for your time.
It really does. When I hear about this kind of stuff, it feels like somebody's grabbing a slice of my soul and just tearing it apart. I just feel so sorry for these kids.
Well, children need protection, don't they? And it's just any crime crime that involves kids is the worst of them all. And the fall from grace for Huw Edwards, somebody I looked up to as well, worked with him at the BBC, admired him, and as the judge said yesterday, his reputation is in tatters.